What is up, everyone? It is September 3rd, Tuesday. Week 1 of NFL action is upon us. And as such, the fantasy football season is firing up. Mike, most of us have gone through our drafts. My home league draft is tonight. We were very last minute.
Mine too. The league I run. I always stick with this day.
Well, and as we're recording, I've got text messages popping up on my screen. We're discussing whether we're going to go with keepers this season or not. So we're doing everything very last minute. But most people have done their drafts like responsible adults. And now it's time for the first waiver wire run of the season. Folks, if you're new to fantasy football, this is where you bolster your team. Sometimes you make draft picks you might kind of regret, or you look at your roster and you're thin at a position. There are guys who have emerged in camp that are not getting drafted that could be impactful this season. Every single week 1 through week 17, because there are degenerates out there like us who play until the final whistle of the final week. We are going to come with waiver wire options at every position to help you keep your rosters fresh. Mike, I'm really looking forward to this, man. Like we've talked about a couple episodes prior, we've been wanting to do this together. We're finally into the season. The real work has begun. And I'm stoked to have you here, man.
Well, thanks, man. As I said when we were chatting just before the show, I can't wait till next week too, when we actually have some data. If you're looking at guys you have that you drafted at the end of your draft, at the end of your bench, that you think you may never play, they become instantly disposable for me, right? Like I always move whoever my worst guy is as the guy I can drop on the waiver wire. I don't even care if he's better than somebody else's, if there's someone you really want to add. So I'm looking forward to this season. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun, man, doing this show.
Yes, absolutely. And as a general rule, every week we are going to give you some players that you can reliably drop off of your rosters, guys who have fallen off, guys who are injured, guys whose outlooks are just not great. Plain and simple, guys you can get off of your roster to pick up some of the guys we're recommending. So first of all, let's get to the chat here. We have got Herms dropping in saying, let's go. Indeed. We are stoked to be here. Good friend of the show, Toronto Dave, up north of us there. He is excited for the show as well. Let's dive into this, man. Let's start with some quarterbacks that we're seeing on the waiver wire. And you can't see my sign behind me, but it said Sam Darnold. That's it. That's the tweet. He's the first guy I want to talk about this week. Now, he's not on our show sheet here, but I did write him up in my waiver wire column that just dropped on optimusfantasy.com. Go check that out. I love this guy right now. You know, I believe his rostership is somewhere around that like 10 to 15% on most platforms. He's not a guy who's being heavily drafted. And if you're in 2 QB formats, at least for the first 3 to 4 weeks, I think Sam Darnold is a guy you can plug in as a reliable QB2, and he's just floating out there, Mike.
We talked about him last week too, right? He's somebody that if you want to take a late round flyer on, you can. I think he's somebody you should have on a watch list at a minimum. He was really good in Carolina until he hurt his shoulder. He was a serviceable backup with the Niners, right?
He was
QB5. Do a lot worse. That's all I can say is you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, look, he was QB5 in Carolina for the first 4 weeks of his short career there when he had weapons like he has in this offense. So Sam Darnold's the first one, guys. I think you need to go out and get this guy. If you are in a 2-quarterback league, maybe you drafted someone you're not happy with, Daniel Jones managers, I'm looking at you. Go out and get yourself a Sam Darnold.
If you're unhappy with what somebody did when they played for the Jets, especially if it's quarterback, just forget that ever existed, because that's the Jets.
It's the Jets. Well, and really, too, if you look at his time in Carolina, he had Matt Rule as his head coach. So you're going to get what you're going to get with a guy like Matt Rule, and we've got to take that kind of stuff into account. Look at Baker Mayfield. He's gotten better coaching in Tampa Bay, and the guy's thriving. He could be a top 10 quarterback this season, a guy that we've repeatedly crapped on in the past because of his performances. Now, another guy that I really love that's on this list, and you threw him on here, Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. He got the nod as the starter for now. That's not a bad offense, Mike.
Well, and last year people crapped all over him, right? And I hate to say this to you, and this doesn't sound positive, but it is. He's not nearly as bad as people said he was last year. He cranked out double-digit fantasy days weekly. he finished as overall quarterback 14 on the
Yep.
season, right? Like, so people talk about him like he was horrible because he wasn't spectacular, but he wasn't bad either. If he's going to be the starter here, there's some weapons. Their wide receiver room could be a little bit better, but you got uh, Pickens, you've got Fryermuth. I like the running backs they have there, including
Yeah.
somebody else we'll talk later on as well. So I think you're going to see him utilized much better. And people who didn't think he would win the starting job there, I'm really sorry, but he is the best quarterback on that team. He's available just about everywhere. You're
Yeah.
talking 8% roster on Yahoo, 5.8% on ESPN, 14% on Sleeper. He's available almost
Yeah.
everywhere.
Well, in QB 14, he only threw 8 interceptions last season in Denver. 26 touchdowns. He ran the ball 80 times, 341 yards. One of his more prolific rushing seasons over the last 3 years. He's adding rushing touchdowns. There's that rushing upside, even though he's getting up there. He's 35, going to be 36. I love this one. I think there's a lot of upside. And like we'll talk about a lot on this show, 2 QB leagues when we're talking about these guys. You've got your QB1. Russell Wilson is a solid QB2 who's going to have more QB1 weeks than not, I feel like, in this Pittsburgh offense. Another guy I really like that people are sleeping on, Mike, Jacoby Brissett in New England. He's the starter, which I don't know why it surprised some people. I think Mayo had been very clear that he was going to start the season. He's 0.8% rostered right now on ESPN, Mike.
I hate the offensive line, and being a local guy, I know
Right.
how bad it really is. It's pathetic. Brissett can run, though. He can get out of the pocket. He can move. He's proven it before. He's been a very serviceable starter and actually a decent fantasy asset in the past in other stops. I don't like the Bengals matchup week 1 all that much. But again, this guy's available really everywhere, right? 7% on Fantrax, 2% roster on Yahoo, 0.8% on ESPN, 5.2% on Sleeper. Especially if you're in a 2 QB league or a super flex, he should be rostered at the very least. And he's not rostered anywhere, right? So
yeah. Well, if you look at the New England offense, there isn't a ton to be excited about, right? Like,
No.
Hunter Henry, Ramondre Stevenson, maybe pick a wide receiver. But Jacoby Brissett can get it done on the ground as well. The last time he was a full-time starter for the majority of his season was in Cleveland in 2022. Mike, he was QB 24 on a pretty crappy offense. So I think he could be QB 24 again. I don't see any reason why he can't be somewhere in that QB2 range, QB 20 to 24. And what is he like realistically? What's he going to cost you on the waiver wire? 1%, 2% of your fab, if you even have to put that up?
Absolutely nothing. And he's found another really crappy offense to become QB2 in.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Gardner Minshew is another guy on this list, and we have talked about him sparingly here, but I want to bring him up because he is currently 2.9% rostered. He has Devontae Adams, Mike Mayer, and Brock Bowers at his disposal. We've seen what Minshew can do in mediocre offenses. He did it in Carolina. In a somewhat better offense, he did it in Indy last season. You're giving him some pretty good weapons. You can argue Zamir White is an elite weapon. Some people think he is. I don't think he is. Jacoby Myers is
slot guy. Yeah,
he is a great slot guy. This is a pretty good offense. Might be amongst the best weapons Gardner Minshew's had. I would be shocked if he doesn't finish in the top 18 QBs if he starts the entirety of the season in Las Vegas.
And if for nothing else, we want him to succeed, so we can use some of those awesome pictures with his facial expressions to lead in for every show possible. I love the guy. I think he's very entertaining. I think he has a lot of weapons there, many more than he had in Indianapolis. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think he should be decent as well. I think you're looking at another QB2.
Oh, I think he's easily a QB2. He was a QB2 last season. 21 QB 21, 17 games, but he started 14 games, I believe it was. If he'd had the whole season, I feel like he would have probably finished a little bit higher than that. So get in on Gardner Minshew. And Jameis Winston. I'm curious what you think about me throwing him on here, Mike, because he's not currently a starter anywhere. There have been rumors that he was going to be shipped off, but now it doesn't look like that's going to be going to happen. They're holding on to him. He is the backup to Deshaun Watson. I feel like that makes him the de facto starter in Cleveland. And at 0.2% rostered on ESPN, he's a guy I'm willing to right now take a chance on, throw him on the back of my bench, wait and see what happens in Cleveland, because we know what's going to happen. And once he is in, I mean, the guy throws a lot of interceptions. He's a little bit wild at quarterback, but he also throws for a lot of yards and he throws a lot of touchdowns.
He's one of my favorite fantasy quarterbacks ever.
Mm-hmm.
He's a gift from fantasy gods if he gets to start. Talk about slinging it and taking chances down the field and getting you fantasy points. And people will always argue, but he's not good at real football. I don't care. I just want the fantasy points. I don't care if he's not good at real football.
Right.
I think you're going to be doing this if he gets to start and you have him. You're going to be going nom, 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 eating wins. He doesn't eat a lot of wins, but you'll be eating fantasy wins. You said he's 0.2% rostered on ESPN. He's 0% rostered on Yahoo.
1% on Sleeper.
Oh, it's 1%?
1% on Sleeper.
And 2% on Fantrax. So
the
guy is rostered nowhere.
Nowhere.
Available everywhere.
He's 30 years old. The last time he was a full-time starter in the NFL was 2019 in Tampa Bay. He was the QB4.
Yeah, if you want to
the
have
infamous 30-30 and 5,000 season, added a rushing touchdown and 250 yards on the ground that season as well. Look, if he starts 13 games in Cleveland, he finishes the season as QB 12
and Amari Cooper
at worst.
And Amari Cooper will have stats galore.
David Njoku will have stats. Jerry Jeudy might get a little bit of a career revival here in Cleveland if they can get Winston in. And I think it's just a matter of time, right? Deshaun Watson still hasn't played in the preseason. I'm not convinced he starts this weekend, Mike.
We'll see. They're saying he is. Winston's a lot more fun for me in fantasy than Watson. And that doesn't mean Watson's not good. He's a much better quarterback, to be honest, but Winston's a lot more fun.
Winston's more fun. And I think if we're being honest, I think Jameis Winston gives them the best chance to win.
Okay.
I just do with this team and this roster. Now, enough about quarterbacks. Let's move on to running backs. We've got far more to talk about here with these. So we're going to try and go through these guys a bit quicker. We're going to start with Khalil Herbert in Chicago. He's currently 19.4% rostered on ESPN. Like we have talked about, you know how I feel about DeAndre Swift, Mike. I don't trust it. And I think Khalil Herbert's going to get a lot more work than people are expecting. He's roughly 20% rostered on ESPN. You can get him. It's going to cost a little bit, but I think it's worth it.
There's one stat I'll talk about with him, just one. We've talked about a few on past shows. 4.9 yards per touch over 12 games last season. So the guy produces when he's touching the football. I like Khalil Herbert. I am definitely a stan of his. I'm always hoping he gets more time. Again, fun player. If he gets the touches he produces, the kind of player where you wonder what coaching staffs are doing when they're not trying to get him the ball. Yeah.
Well, 2022, 129 carries, 731 yards, 5.67 yards per carry over 13 games that season. I think he gets more than a change of pace shot. And I think he's someone you need to be looking at if you're thin at running back. Another one, Deontay Foreman in Cleveland. We have no timetable, realistic actual timetable on Nick Chubb's return. They're rolling with Jerome Ford. But again, most offenses, they're going to be running two backs with enough volume for them to be fantasy relevant. Deontay Foreman's only 2.7% rostered, Mike.
Which is kind of a surprise, right? I guess it's recency bias. Last season, week 7, he had that 33-point outburst of fantasy points, and people went nuts trying to add him, and then he didn't touch the ball again in Chicago. But in 2022 in Carolina, he's another guy who was very productive with the minutes he got, and that was after coming back from an injury. which people thought his career was over. He's a personal favorite of mine because I like the story of him coming back from injury and producing, right? I hope he's productive and I hope he gets playing time because he's just one of those guys. He comes to work, he does his job exceptionally well when asked, and he produces fantasy points when given the chance as well. Yeah. I like Foreman a lot. I'm hoping if there's a share, I hope it's him in Cleveland. You figure he's got to end up with like 30% of the work at some point.
At least.
Yeah.
At least. 2022, that season that you referenced in Carolina, he didn't really do much through the first 6 weeks. But when he did come on, Mike, it was incredible. 15 carries, 118 yards. 26 carries, 118 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Week 8 against Atlanta. When he was getting double-digit touches, when he was getting 15 to 20 touches a game, he was getting well into the 100 yards. Week 16 against a good Detroit defense, 21 carries for 165 yards. So all they need to do is give D'Onta Foreman the ball, and I think that he, at the minimum, can be a solid flex play for most of the season.
He carried my fantasy team then as well.
Yep.
He was carrying a lot of heavy things. I was
mine too. Mine too. The next guy I didn't think we'd be talking about, cordarrelle Patterson in Pittsburgh, 1.3% rostered on ESPN. This is an Arthur Smith thing. Only way I can put it, the only reason I can feel like we're actually talking about cordarrelle Patterson in an offense where they already have Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, guys we have talked about on this show and we'll talk about again this season. But it just feels like cordarrelle Patterson somehow, some way is going to end up getting 30 to 40% of the carries out of the backfield in this offense because it's Patterson, because it's Arthur Smith.
He had 3 rushing attempts for 31 yards and a touchdown in that last preseason game. Warren is definitely dinged up, and that was with the starters, by the way. That when he did that wasn't with the backups. He's rostered nowhere, just nowhere. Nobody's drafting him. He's probably the only guy who likes Arthur Smith as a coach on the planet.
Probably
touches. And it wasn't all that long ago where, I mean, he was carrying fantasy teams in Atlanta as well. 2022,
2-3 years ago. Yeah. Look, I'm not dunking on Patterson's talent. Okay. It just feels weird that we're talking about him in Pittsburgh with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, but also knowing it's Arthur Smith, he could be fantasy relevant. You're not going to have to pay up to get him. He's worth a back-end bench stash. Kind of the same way I feel about, I want to run through this group together here because all these guys I love, and I think they're worth adding. Bucky Irving in Tampa Bay, Tyrone Tracy in New York, and Dylan Laube in Las Vegas. Bucky Irving being the highest rostered at 18%, Tracy at 8%, and then Laube is all the way at the bottom at 1%. Now, this is a grouping of rookie guys that I think we all collectively as an analyst community have a feeling are going to break out. They should be relatively inexpensive to roster at this point too, Mike.
Super inexpensive to roster. All of them are going to see touches, right? At some point, I think Dylan Laube is probably the least likely of those 3 to get a bunch of touches. I like Bucky Irving. I like Tyrone Tracy a lot. Tracy was a wide receiver. Barkley's gone. Singletary's the starter there. I mean, Tracy's essentially going to be his backup, it looks like, and he's a pass catcher. I see him fitting into that offense very, very well. If Bucky gets to split some time with Rashod White in Tampa, I really like him there as well. I think he's going to catch some passes, and he's going to be their third down back also.
Yep. No, and I'm with you. Now, if you're not going to roster one of those guys, you're looking for someone who's going to have like pretty immediate upside. Samaje Perine, he's now in Kansas City. He got the cut from the Broncos. A guy I think a lot of us thought was going to have a breakout in Colorado and Denver last season. I did too. I was rostering him very heavily. It was a disappointment, but Perine signs with Kansas City, and immediately Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes on IR. Jerick McKinnon is no longer on the team. We got really excited about the Steele guy. I can't even think of his name right now. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I'm not.
Carson Steele.
I was never excited about Steele, so
some people were getting excited about him. Now, perine, 2.2% rostered on ESPN, heading into waivers tonight. This is a guy I would make a priority. We know that he can catch the ball. We know that he's an efficient back. His yards per carry is higher than you would expect out of a guy who's mostly been a backup. Could he be an RB1?
Well, let's talk about where he is, and coaching matters, right? Andy Reid running backs are very successful, and he usually uses two, and they're usually both successful.
Mm-hmm.
Last year may have been an exception. It was mostly Pacheco. I'm a Isaiah Pacheco guy. I have been since he started getting some run there. I was hoping he would. We're talking about a guy who had over 50 receptions last year in Denver, and I think we viewed him as useless. That's 50 catches in Denver last year. In 2022, he had a 3-game stretch in Cincy where he was just magnificent. 30 points, 19 points, and 21 points from weeks 11 through week 13 in 2022. I was kind of hoping he would take over for Mixon because I'm not a Mixon guy. I used to say never Mixon all the time. And this guy was just much more effective. Again, another guy seems like the trend, if given the opportunity, seems to always produce. So Andy Reid's probably going to use him as that passing down back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is missing at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So he walks into an immediate role. If he's the passing down back there, I mean, what were we looking at from the last passing down back there?
Well, Jerick McKinnon won people leagues in 2022.
I was just going to say, Jerick McKinnon was a league winner.
He was. 2023 wasn't as great for him, but he was also injured for the majority of the season. But McKinnon did finish as RB20 in 2022. Perine is considerably younger, and I think that Perine can eclipse that. I think he can finish higher than RB20 in Kansas City offense. I mean, this is a mostly throw-first offense, and yes, a lot of that goes through Kelsey, but as he gets older, it can't always go through Kelsey, and I'm not saying that I'm dinging his value, but I'm saying that other pieces in this offense are going to have to step up. And I think Samaje Perine is one of those guys who can contribute on the passing side of things more than Isaiah Pacheco can. And I think that gives him just so much value in PPR formats, especially in PPR.
Hunt.
Yes, very much so. Think Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt.
Yep. Okay, Mike, before we move on, we've got some questions in the chat that I wanted to pop up here. First of all, we've got George Play 01. He asked if we could take a look at his team. He dropped it in the chat. Here's what we've got here. 12-team non-PPR. He's got Kyler Murray, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, George Kittle. His flex is Javonte Williams. Now, on his bench, he has got Kirk Cousins, Brian Robinson, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Zay Flowers, Adonai Mitchell, and Brian Thomas Jr. What do we think of this team, Mike? I'm looking at it, and I feel like this team's got enough depth. I don't think there's much I would do heading into week one. I'm pleased. I'd be very pleased with
that. I would say you like rookies. That's for sure, George.
Yeah.
You're probably a dynasty guy in a redraft league. But your rookies are all on your bench, which is good right now. I mean, I think Corum's going to get some run as the season goes on. It's only a matter of time before Connor gets hurt and Benson gets play. I really like the Brian Thomas Jr. pick there, by the way, and I like the Wright pick as well. Your starters are very, very, very solid. I mean, there's Javonte flex. I love that, by the way. That I love.
Javonte is going to be an RB1 this year. I
mean,
he's going to be an RB1. I think what I like the most about this is the sneaky upside on that bench, Mike. Brian Robinson, people are really sleeping on him this season. He was good. And yes, they brought in Austin Eckler, more of a receiving back.
Starter, though. Yeah.
He's not the starter. Right? Brian Robinson is a 3-down back. He proved he was a 3-down back last year. They let J.D. McKissick go. He was in that pass catching role. They were happy with Brian Thomas. You don't pass up an opportunity to get a guy like Austin Eckler in your locker room, especially if you can afford him. Most teams run 2 backs, but Brian Robinson is still the guy. So I love this team. Great team here. And then we've got this one here from SJMP. So my lineup currently is Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Rashod White, Devontae Adams, Brandon Ayuk, Jake Moody at kicker, and the Ravens defense. He has Keon Coleman, Terry McLaurin, Bucky Irving, Hollywood Brown, Dontavian Wicks, and Justin Hill on his bench. He wants to know, Mike, if he was to package up Rashod White and Adams in a trade package for someone, who should he aim for? Or should he even make that trade at all? He's been seeing Adams is on the decline, so he's not sure if he should trade for him before it's too late. So here's what I would say. I really like Devontae Adams. I know he's getting up there in age. I'm assuming that this is based on the trade. This is dynasty. I'd still hold on to him this year. This is a team that I think can win now. And keep Adams because he's a guy who can help you win now. Don't move him yet.
I wouldn't move him yet either, and I would want to keep Rashod White, to be honest. I think he's
same.
A little underrated.
Bucky Irving is going to get his work in Tampa Bay, but again,
White will be good though.
We keep we keep talking about, the NFL is a 2-back system now. Very few teams are running out of bell cow. I don't even know. I mean, I think Justice Hill has some value in Baltimore behind Derrick Henry. It's situational flex value.
Keaton is on IR, is he not? Right?
Keaton Mitchell is on IR, yes.
On IR. So
Justice Hill's a guy. Yeah. Yep. I want to real quick highlight Jerry Bagshot in the chat saying hello, Jerry. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. And a friend of the show and Mr. Optimus Fantasy Herb saying, do not besmirch the name of Carson Steele. This must be the new Ronald Jones for him. I guess, I don't know, man. I guess we'll allow it here. RB1 in non-PPR. Who do you think it's going to be, Mike?
Henry.
You think it's going to be Henry? I think it has to be Henry. Yeah. I don't see any other way around it. I don't care how old he is. All right, now let's get to the wide receivers, Mike. We all love wide receivers, and generally in fantasy drafts, a lot of guys are going off the board early at this position.
Oh, yes.
It can be really hard when it gets to the waiver wire to scrape together any wide receivers, but I think we found some good ones. I want to start with Greg Dortch in Arizona, 4% rostered. It sounds like he's moving back to the slot, which is what he primarily did in 2022. I believe it was 460 of his 622 offensive snaps were in the slot in 22. They moved him outside last season. He wasn't as prolific a receiver. They're moving him back inside with Marvin Harrison Jr. Rondale Moore is gone.
I love Dortch.
Marquise Brown is gone.
And I love him in the slot because I think he had like maybe 1 or 2 passes he didn't catch when he was playing in the slot. It was remarkable what he did. I played him all the time in DFS that year, and I had added him to a couple of fantasy teams, but I played him a lot when I knew he was starting. Zay Jones is suspended, right? Rondale Moore's gone. This guy's rostered in less than 10% of fantasy leagues.
3%
everywhere.
on sleeper.
Yeah, very low rostership. There is a bunch of us talking about him on Twitter often. You'll see Laquan Jones talk about Dorchland, right? Welcome to Dorchland. A lot of us in the industry are very high on Greg Dortch, especially with him in the slot.
Well, he's more efficient in the slot, right?
Oh, so efficient. That's why what I like.
You're putting him in offense where his competition for targets, Trey McBride, who is probably going to see in the 120 to 130 targets range. Marvin Harrison Jr., who's probably going to be north of 150 targets in this offense. But then you've got Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. Dortch is the only guy who's going to be working out of the slot. I think he could reasonably in this offense see 100 targets, 115 targets. He could be the third highest targeted. Yeah. Even if he gets 80, sneaky touchdown upside out of him. But as we mentioned, Michael Wilson, the other one, is also on this offense. He is also on this list. 16.7% rostered on ESPN. This is a thing for me, Mike, where it's just, I want to be a part of this offense because I think it's going to be explosive. Marvin Harrison Jr. was very expensive to roster in drafts. Kyler Murray has been pricey to get. His draft stock is kind of inching up here. Trey McBride is going off the board as a tight end 2 in some leagues. So Wilson and Dortch they're less expensive ways to get into an offense. It's going to produce a lot of points in fantasy.
Yeah, we're not looking at wide receiver 1s out of these two
Right.
guys, right? But if you want to talk about exceeding ADP, they're not being drafted, and they both are capable of returning wide receiver 3 numbers. Some of that might end up being matchup dependent for them, but
Yep.
Wilson's played great in the preseason, and so has Dortch. That's why Rondell Moore's gone, right? These guys have played exceptionally well. I like this offense a lot this year. I liked it last year too, by the way. When Murray's on the field, this offense is exciting. Another fun to watch team. They'll spread the ball around. It's going to be a good season for the Cardinals.
Yeah, it is. This is just an offense I want shares of. Wherever I'm at, whatever league, whatever format, doesn't matter. I just want in on this offense. And, I could say the same thing for Rashod Bateman. I really like. He's the wide receiver 1. We love Zay Flowers, but Bateman is still the wide receiver 1 in this offense. 6.2% rostered. Somebody's got to get the targets. They're not going to throw a ton. A lot of it's going to go to Mark Andrews. But again, he's an inexpensive acquisition. And if it doesn't play out, if you've got a spot on the back of your bench, he's a guy I would grab, see if he kind of emerges as a guy who can get 6 to 7 targets a game. You can play him as a flex. And if not, drop him week 3 or week 4.
Well, I took some heat for mixing it up with some people over Zay Flowers, and the fact that I don't think he's going to exceed his ADP.
Right. You and I talked about that last week.
Yeah, I think you're drafting him at the right spot, and I think his ADP is fine, and I think he'll meet it, right? And I think we'll see something like what he did last year, and people are expecting him to break out, and I'm like, that's not what this team does. They spread the ball around. Bateman's going to see 10, 15% target share if that's the low end for him, because they had 4 guys last year with over 10% target share, and I can't even name them off the top of my head, right? So he's going to get double-digit target share, and he's good. He's good when he's healthy. He wasn't very healthy last year.
No.
So, I think he's going to surprise some people with some production as well. Recency bias is what I would blame all this on.
It's a hell of a drug, man. We got in the chat, Flash Bateman is ugh. He doesn't like it.
Yeah.
I understand that. And we've got Chris Robin popping in the chat saying, Reedy, what is up, Chris? Thanks for tuning in, man. We appreciate it. I get it. I get saying Bateman's ugh. There were a lot of expectations for him his rookie season. He didn't quite live up to those. But it's not always pretty. But when you're looking at bench guys that you just need to get some points a couple of weeks out of, Bateman could be that guy. And again, if he ends up not being that guy, you can drop him and move on. There are going to be other guys available later on in the season. One of those guys I think might be Andrei Iosivas. I think I said it right. Iosivas. Andrei Iosivas in Cincinnati. Tyler Boyd's gone. He's a guy on this list. Tennessee, maybe think about him. He's worth a stab, much in the same way that I think Rashod Bateman is. That's all we're going to talk about Tyler Boyd here.
There's a Holden, though, with Jamar Chase. And let's face it, if Chase doesn't play, you're looking at T. Higgins and Andrei Iosivas as the starting tandem. And he'll be very valuable, especially in DFS, by the way, if that's the case, because his price is going to be low.
Yep. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Right? What if he's this year's Puka?
Well, I don't think that's happening.
That's not happening anywhere. The last guy we're going to talk about, wide receivers, and we've got some things in the chat I want to get to, Mike. Luke McCaffrey in Washington, 4% rostered right now on ESPN. He's a McCaffrey. You always want, the family's just crazy athletic, right? The second kid to get to the NFL, but more importantly, he's a slot receiver for the Washington Commanders and this Jaden Daniels offense that we're all getting Twitter pated by.
Who's going to be their second wide receiver?
Luke McCaffrey.
Right now in the depth chart, it's not Luke McCaffrey, but we'll see how this.
It's Olamide Zaccheaus and Diami Brown. Maybe
these are guys we already know, and they haven't done much. So
Zaccheaus isn't a wide receiver too. We've seen enough out of Zaccheaus to know he's been in a couple of situations. He's a good little change of pace back, great deep receiver, but he can't exist as a wide receiver 2 in an offense. McCaffrey's a slot guy. You're going to see him line up in the slot. He'll take over that wide receiver 2 role. Leave Dyami Brown as the wide receiver 3. I'm totally fine with that. The chat just mentioned that Noah Brown went to. He did. Okay, but still, Luke McCaffrey will be the wide receiver 2 in this offense at some point during the season. It's not that I don't like Noah Brown, but Noah Brown's Olamide Zaccheaus. A little bit bigger.
Maybe better, too, but yeah.
Maybe a little better. But he's not going to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense.
It's easier to be bigger than Zaccheaus. He's 5'8". I mean, he's really small.
Yeah, fair point. All right, well, let's get to some of these questions we got in the chat here, Mike. But let me pull that up here. Managing and talking all at the same time. T-Money here wants to know what we think of this team. 10-man PPR. Mahomes, Jacobs, Connor, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Dalton Kincaid, DK Metcalf, Xavier Worthy, and Calvin Ridley. Did I cook? T-Money, you cooked a fine Michelin star rated meal there. That is, I am impressed here. Herms saying in the chat, the human Dortch will not be denied a bank loan. Let's hope not, man. Then Flash wants to know here, don't you feel 2 tight end sets with Henry will have likely on the field a lot? You know, I want to say yes, Mike. I want to so badly. We haven't seen it happen yet.
I was going to say, I keep hearing talk about this in the offseason that they're going to have 2 TE sets with likely on the field. And he's going to be used more like a wide receiver. Until I see it, I won't.
I'm not buying it. Yeah. I'm with you.
The coaching staff didn't change that much. That's all I can say.
Right. So, now Quincy Davis in the chat here. He wants to know, Mike, he needs 1 flex. Tanker Neighbors. Who do you got? If we're talking to start this week, I'm probably going to go Tank Dell.
If we're talking about the quarterback keeps mentioning this wide receiver by name, we're talking about Tank Dell. CJ Stroud keeps talking about Tank Dell, which means I like Tank Dell a lot.
Yep. And it's not that I don't like Malik Neighbors. Something you'll notice in my rankings for week 1 here. I've got all of these rookie guys down a few slots. Just because plain and simple, dude, it's their first game in the NFL. All right. It's going to take a second for them to get acclimated. And it might be the second half of week 1 that they get acclimated. But I don't want
half of the season.
It could be the second half of the season. That's the problem. And you look at guys like Malik Neighbors, where you know he's going to be a big thing in this league.
Oh, he's good.
We're going to be down the line talking about how is he a top 3 receiver? Is he the wide receiver 1? That conversation is coming down the road. It's not this season, though. He's in a bad offense with a bad quarterback. That caps, for me as a rookie, that kind of caps him. You can be as mad as you want about it. I'm sure I'll get shit for it later, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Danny Jones is not that good. No.
No. All right. We've got the last position to get through here, and then we're going to get everyone out of here. We'll make this one quick here. Tight ends, Mike. Unless you got one of the top 5 guys, you're probably streaming this season. So this might be a very important segment for a lot of managers out there. This one's easy for me. This week, I'm looking at Juwan Johnson, 12.5% rostered on ESPN. He's in New Orleans. I hate this offense with an absolute passion, except for Alvin Kamara, Juwan Johnson. Kendre Miller's on IR. There isn't a whole lot to this offense. As much as I love Chris Olave, the talent's there. Derek Carr's the quarterback. Juwan Johnson might be the only part of this offense I'm okay rostering in fantasy outside Alvin Kamara. And even he's going to be a roller coaster.
I'm a Taysom Hill guy. So
sure.
Or rostering Taysom Hill, especially if he's TE eligible in your league. Juwan Johnson, when healthy, is a very good tight end. Very underrated tight end. And he gets utilized, in the red zone. So
Dennis Allen loves him.
Yeah, I like him too when he's healthy.
Yep.
He's dinged up all the time. That's the only problem I have with him. He's dinged up a lot.
Now, this next guy's a little bit riskier, Mike. Chigakonkwo in Tennessee. He's currently 18.3% rostered. This is kind of a boom bust. Really what you're going to look for in rostering a guy like Chig is you're going to look for weeks where they're playing defenses that are bad at covering tight ends, but maybe a little bit better at covering wide receivers. It's hard to know what this Tennessee offense is going to be. I want to believe in Will Levis, but I can't.
I don't believe in him yet. I need proof. He
Yep,
wasn't
same.
that good last year, so we'll see.
He was okay a few times.
Yeah.
So a new offense, new offensive coordinator, new head coach. We'll see what this team does. But now this guy I'm a little bit more excited about. Greg Dulcich in Denver. 1.2% rostered on ESPN right now. They let Tim Patrick go. So now they're basically riding with Marvin Mims, Cortland Sutton.
Josh Reynolds is
Josh Reynolds,
the other starter.
Yep.
That's so exciting, isn't it? Josh Reynolds.
Oh, I wrote him up in my waiver wire article. I don't think he's a bad addition.
But
I think it's interesting.
Exciting.
It's not exciting. Greg Dulcich, though, for me, I am excited about it. And here's why. Yeah, we kind of forgot he existed. He only played 2 games last season. He had 4 total targets. He was hurt. His rookie season, he missed his first 5 games. Then he missed the last 2 that season. However, in that 11-game stretch between week 6 and week 16, where he was healthy, he was the PPR tight end 10 in that stretch. Now, he had some really crappy games in there, a 2-point, a 3-point. But now that we have an offense that seems to actually be getting its crap together, Dulcich could be the wide receiver 2, very easily be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And as Andrew Cooper says, that's what you want in the tight end.
So it's funny because what I wrote up for notes on this was we're looking at the guy who very well could be the second option in this offense. If he's the second option in this offense, you want him. You want a passing tree with small amount of branches on it if you can help it. He's again free everywhere, right? So if you have a spot where you could add him because somebody's already hurt or you don't like that you drafted, this is a good guy to stash on the end and see what happens with. Again, and it's free. So if it doesn't pan out, you just waive them and you don't care. Not a big deal.
Well, and for me, Dulcich feels like a guy where you're streaming tight ends and then he just plays so well that you don't have to stream tight ends the rest of the season and you accidentally found your guy.
I love when
if he's full on, me too, man. That's like it's like the people who were like, oh, James Robinson guy, I could probably stream. He just won me my league. There you go. But Dulcich, if he's full on in this offense, and Bo Nix is actually as competent as he appeared to be in the preseason, and as the Denver media is telling us all he is, Dulcich could be tight end 5 or higher. With the level of volume he'll see in this offense, in 2022, 55 targets for a tight end over 16 games, and they eased him into it. He could have seen a lot more volume, and he didn't see it. This year, he could see that volume. We could see 100 targets plus for Dulcich. And if he gets that volume, I don't know how he's not a top 5 tight end. Unless he just completely craps the bed.
Well, he's going to need the volume. That's the point, right?
Right.
If he's getting it, and I mean, who else do they have? So
that's my point, right? The red zone work might be sparing because they've got Javonte Williams and they love Jaleel McLaughlin.
I know.
But also, I mean, he could see some targets in the red zone too. I mean, if we get 3 or 4 touchdowns out of Dulcich plus the volume, there's no way he's not tight end 5 or higher. And that's just simple. That's what the position is in fantasy at this point. Now, the last 2 guys I really like rookies. Well, one of them is a rookie. Colby Parkinson in Los Angeles. He's a Ram now, 5% rostered on ESPN. This feels like it could be a good situation for Colby Parkinson to actually do something. We waited in Seattle. We thought maybe he was going to be a thing. This offense feels like somewhere he fits in.
He's really big, like really big. And Tyler Higbee's recovering from a torn ACL. So, even when he's back, he's not really going to be back. They have some talented wide receivers. I mean, just a couple, right? So
just a few.
And they like to use their running backs as well in the passing game. But Higbee's been a little up and down, but has been a good tight end when on the field. I like Colby Parkinson here. I literally took him with the last pick in a draft. I just did an industry draft that ended last week. He was my last pick. It was a 2 tight end league.
Yeah.
And he's my third tight end. And I was pretty happy with that. If he doesn't work out, again, I don't care. If he works out, I'm stoked, right? So,
Well, so I'll say this. Higbee's on PUP, out for at least the first 4 weeks. In 2022, Tyler Higbee was the tight end 6 in PPR in a very similar offense. I mean, they lost Zach Robinson, right? Their passing game coordinator, but it's still Sean McVay. So we're going to see a very similar attack from this offense. If Parkinson can be half as good as Higbee was in 2022, get him to tight end 12, kind of like that Jake Ferguson type sneaks into the back end of it, I'd be happy to have him at this cost right now.
if he just becomes a red zone target, I would be happy with the cost, right?
Yep. And I think we can say the same thing about the other guy on this list here, Theo Johnson in New York, the rookie, 1% owned. He was the fastest tight end in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He had almost wide receiver speed. He's a big dude out of Penn State. Daniel Bellinger's there.
Yeah.
But Darren Waller's gone. And I don't know how much. I feel like we would have seen more Bellinger last season if we were going to see it. I feel like there might be some lingering issues.
He was a little dinged up too.
That's true.
Last year, I like Theo. He was hurt during a portion of the preseason. He's not now. Danny Dimes, right, is prolific in the short passing game, which is why they have 8 million slot receivers on their roster, and why the running backs and the tight end catch a lot of passes. So, this is a guy who could become very serviceable in this offense that they run there. It's very.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I want to highlight this comment from the chat real quick here from Jamie Parag. The Rams gave Cody Parkinson top 20 tight end money. It stands to reason they're probably going to use him. And then this one here from Flash. So with that said, start Rice over Harrison Jr., starting Ayuk, Evans in 2 other spots. So obviously it's not a tight end question, but we're going to hit it anyway before we get into the droppables. I'd start Harrison Jr. over Rice.
I could go either way with that Rashi Rice. Either way. I don't know. I'd have to dig a little deeper like I will for the DFS show, but I think you could go either way with that right now. If you feel confident in Rice, I do, because that offense is pretty potent. But that doesn't mean I'm not confident in Harrison. You're talking about 2 guys where they're probably projected to something similar in week 1. You can go either way with this. I would definitely start Evans and Ayuk in the other 2 spots, though, and then pick one of these guys. If you don't feel confident with the rookie game 1 of his career, start Rice and feel confident with that.
And I'd be okay with that too. Marvin Harrison just seems to have, to me, it feels like he has more upside week 1 than Rice does, but I'm fine with going either way. And then one more here, Mr. Scampers, all the way from California, saying, good morning, fellas. It is actually technically still morning for you West Coasters, not for us in the Mountain Range or the East Coast. It's daytime now. It's legit daytime. Now, I want to get into just real quick. We'll run through these, Mike. These are some players right now that are definitively, unquestionably droppable. Elijah Mitchell, running back in San Francisco. He is on IR. Bob, go get Jordan Mason. You probably already missed out on him, to be honest. That's why he's not on this list. A.J. Dillon in Green Bay, also done for the season. Go get Marshawn Lloyd. Go get Emmanuel Wilson. Those are the guys that are going to pick up the slack for Dillon. Miles Sanders. He's not on IR. He just sucks. And you can drop him. This is Chuba's backfield. Miles Sanders is going to be, at best, a change of pace back. There's no sliminess left in slime. Get him off of your rosters if you've got him. In Dynasty, too. Get anything. Pack him into a trade. Maybe nobody will notice that you're getting rid of him and clearing that roster space. Dameon Pierce in Houston. Look, dude, Cam Akers passed him on the depth chart. That's the death knell, right? Dameon Pierce is done in Houston. Get him off of your rosters. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, good old CEH. He's on IR. He might come off week 5, but it doesn't really matter. This is Samaje Perine's RB2 world, and we're just all living in it. And that goes for CEH as well. He's relegated to a backup role, in my opinion. Dead weight. See you later. Bye-bye. Get rid of CEH, guys. And that does it for us, Mike.
Thanks,
Week
everybody.
1 in the books.
So excited, right? We're all excited.
Yeah, we did it, guys. Well, thank you for everyone who tuned in, everyone who dropped in the chat. We love the questions. If you're watching this after the fact, throw those messages, throw those questions in the chat. We'll try and come back around and get them answered tonight before waivers drop. It's been a pleasure, Mike. Anything you want to say to our listeners and our viewers before we get out of here?
No, just thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for following. It's going to be a fun season for us.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. Now, tune in tomorrow, the Nate and Herms Show debut for week 1 of the NFL season. We are looking forward to it. Another pairing, Mike, I have tried to get together. We've been good friends for the better part of 5 years. This is going to be our first regular show together. So
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, man, me too. And then we've got stuff all week. We've got our DFS show coming up on Thursday ahead of Thursday Night Football. We have got the mailbag show coming on Friday. Our flagship fantasy show is also going to be going out on Thursday, guys. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to check out optimusfantasy.com. We're going to have articles dropping all week long. We've got Bo McBrayer out there, the king of spice, dropping his musings every single week. Casey Kasem bringing you wide receiver 2s that are going to score wide receiver 1 points every week and save you from losing, guys. Waiver wire articles, start sit. We've got it all. So make sure you're checking out the website. And most importantly, make sure you are subscribed here. Make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Like this video, like this podcast. It helps us keep going for you. For Mike Reedy, I'm Nate Polvogt, guys. Have a great week 1 of fantasy football. Happy winning.